Standing in my childhood bedroom, staring at the patent documents my neighbor had forwarded me, I felt my entire world crumble. My own brother Marcus had stolen my revolutionary app idea and filed it under his name 6 months ago. The same idea I had spent 2 years developing, the one I had foolishly shared during family dinners, believing blood meant loyalty. My parents knew. They had chosen their golden boy over their daughter again. But this time their betrayal would cost them everything they held dear. Before we dive into how I dismantled my own family piece by piece, I need to know where you are watching from. Are you Team Justice or Team Forgiveness? Hit that like button if you have ever been the black sheep in your family, and do not forget to subscribe because this revenge story gets so much darker than you think. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. My name is Serafina, and I have always been the overlooked daughter in the Blake family dynasty. While my younger brother Marcus received praise for breathing, I had to fight for every scrap of acknowledgement. Our parents, successful real estate moguls, made no secret of their favoritism. Marcus was their heir apparent, destined to inherit the family business, while I was expected to marry well and fade into the background. But I had other plans. For 2 years, I had been secretly developing an innovative property management app called PropSync. It would revolutionize how landlords and tenants interacted, featuring real-time maintenance requests, automated rent collection, and AI-powered property analytics. I had invested every penny of my savings, worked 18-hour days, and sacrificed my social life to perfect this creation. The idea had come to me during a particularly frustrating experience with my own landlord. Waiting weeks for a simple repair, dealing with lost paperwork, and watching miscommunications spiral into legal threats made me realize how broken the entire system was. I saw an opportunity to create something that would benefit everyone involved. During family dinners, I would excitedly share my progress with Marcus and my parents. I trusted them completely. Marcus would ask detailed questions about the algorithms, the user interface, and the monetization strategy. I thought he was being supportive. Our mother, Patricia, would nod politely, but always steered the conversation back to Marcus and his latest achievements at his marketing firm. Our father, Robert, barely looked up from his phone. The betrayal began subtly. Marcus started working late more frequently, claiming new projects at his job. He would disappear into his home office for hours, emerging only to grab coffee and return to his mysterious work. When I asked about his projects, he became evasive, claiming confidentiality agreements prevented him from sharing details. Meanwhile, I was approaching the final stages of my app development. I had already begun reaching out to potential investors and had scheduled meetings with several venture capital firms. The prototype was nearly complete, and I was preparing to file for patent protection. That was my crucial mistake, waiting until the product was perfect instead of securing my intellectual property immediately. 3 months ago, during our weekly family dinner, something felt different. Marcus seemed unusually confident, almost smug. He kept checking his phone and smiling mysteriously. When I mentioned my upcoming investor meetings, he wished me luck with an expression that in hindsight was clearly condescending. 2 weeks later, I discovered why. My neighbor Jessica worked at the patent office and happened to recognize my name on a filing. She called me immediately, her voice filled with confusion and concern. Someone had filed a patent for an app remarkably similar to mine, using my exact technical specifications and even some of my unique feature descriptions. The applicant was Marcus Blake. My hands shook as I read through the documents Jessica had sent me. Every innovative feature I had conceived, every algorithm I had developed, every user experience improvement I had crafted. It was all there, claimed as Marcus's original work. The filing date was 6 months earlier, which meant he had been planning this theft while sitting at our dinner table listening to me share my dreams and aspirations. The financial implications were staggering. I had spent over $50,000 of my own money on development costs, legal consultations, and market research. I had turned down job offers to focus entirely on this project. My credit cards were maxed out, and I had been living on ramen noodles for months, all for an idea that my own brother had stolen from under my nose. But the emotional devastation cut even deeper than the financial loss. This was not just about money or business. This was about family loyalty, trust, and the fundamental belief that blood relations meant something. I had shared my most precious creation with the people I loved most, only to have it weaponized against me. The technical details in the patent were so specific, so perfectly aligned with my own work, that there was no question about the source. Marcus had even included my proprietary algorithm for predictive maintenance scheduling, something I had developed after months of research and testing. He had copied my innovation down to the smallest detail. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by years of research notes, sketches, and development documents, I realized that confronting Marcus directly would accomplish nothing. He had already committed the ultimate betrayal. There was no coming back from this level of deception. Instead, I began planning something much more strategic. I started gathering evidence methodically. Every email I had sent to family members about my progress, every text message discussing features and timelines, every photo of my whiteboard sketches from family gatherings where Marcus was present. I documented everything, creating an ironclad timeline that would prove beyond any doubt that my idea had been stolen. The most damning evidence came from my own cloud storage. I had detailed timestamps showing when each feature had been conceived and developed, dating back 2 years. Marcus's patent filing, by contrast, showed a suspiciously compressed timeline with no supporting documentation or iterative development process. But I needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal before making my move. I had to know whether my parents were complicit or merely naive. That answer would come sooner than I expected, and it would shatter whatever remained of my faith in family bonds. The confrontation happened exactly 1 week after I discovered the patent theft. I had spent those 7 days carefully planning my approach, gathering evidence, and preparing for every possible response. I chose to address it during our regular Sunday family dinner when both parents would be present, and Marcus would have nowhere to hide. I arrived at my parents' sprawling suburban home with a manila folder containing printed copies of the patent documents, my development timeline, and supporting evidence. My heart pounded as I sat through the usual small talk about Marcus's promotion prospects and my mother's charity work. I waited until dessert was served before dropping my bombshell. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands, "I need to ask you about something interesting that came to my attention this week." He looked up from his chocolate cake, his expression immediately guarded. "What about?" I slid the patent documents across the mahogany dining table. "This patent filing for an app that is remarkably similar to the one I have been developing for 2 years. The color drained from Marcus's face, but he tried to maintain his composure. "I do not know what you are talking about, Sarah. That is my original work." "Your original work?" I pulled out my phone and began showing screenshots of my development timeline. "Then perhaps you can explain how your original work includes the exact same proprietary algorithm I designed 18 months ago. The one I showed you on my laptop right here in this dining room." My father, Robert, set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. Serafina, what exactly are you accusing your brother of? I am not accusing him of anything, Dad. I am stating facts. Marcus stole my app idea and filed a patent for it using my technical specifications. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his initial panic replaced by calculated arrogance. You are being paranoid, Sarah. Similar ideas happen all the time in tech. Just because we thought of something around the same time does not mean I stole anything from you. Around the same time? I laughed bitterly. Marcus, I have documented evidence spanning 2 years of development. You filed this patent 6 months ago, which coincidentally was right after I gave you a detailed walkthrough of my user interface design. My mother, Patricia, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Serafina, honey, I think you might be overreacting. Marcus has always been entrepreneurial. Maybe you both had the same idea independently. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Even presented with clear evidence, she was taking his side. Mom, are you seriously suggesting that it is a coincidence that every single innovative feature in his patent matches my development notes? I spread more documents across the table. Screenshots of emails I had sent to the family group, chat photos of my whiteboard from family gatherings, and time-stamped files from my computer. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Marcus studied the papers for a moment, then made a decision that revealed his true character. Instead of apologizing or showing any remorse, he doubled down on his lie. Sarah, I understand you are disappointed that someone beat you to market with a similar idea, but this accusation is ridiculous. I have been working on this concept for over a year. The fact that we discussed property management at family dinners does not mean I stole your idea. A year. I pulled out my laptop and opened a file dated 18 months earlier. This is the first sketch I made of the user interface. Notice the timestamp. Now look at your patent filing date. You are claiming you developed this idea 6 months before I even conceived it. Yet somehow your interface design is identical to mine, down to the button placement. The evidence was so damning that even Marcus began to look uncomfortable. But what happened next would forever change my relationship with my parents and reshape my understanding of family loyalty. My father cleared his throat and assumed his authoritative business voice. Serafina, I think you need to be very careful about making these kinds of accusations against your brother. Patent disputes can get very complicated, and frankly, I do not think you have the resources to pursue this legally, even if you are right. His words were like a knife to my heart. Even if I am right, Dad, I just showed you irrefutable proof that Marcus stole my work, and your response is to warn me about the cost of legal action. What I am saying, he continued, is that Marcus is about to launch his app next month. He has investors lined up and a marketing budget secured. Even if there was some overlap in your ideas, the practical reality is that he is in a position to bring this product to market successfully. My mother nodded in agreement. Your father is right, Sarah. Marcus has always been better with business execution. Maybe this happened for a reason. You could focus on supporting his success instead of trying to tear him down. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of my grandmother's antique clock. I stared at my parents in disbelief, finally understanding the depth of their betrayal. They were not just choosing Marcus over me. They were actively encouraging him to profit from my stolen work while suggesting I should be grateful for the opportunity to help him succeed. Marcus, emboldened by our parents' support, leaned forward with a smirk that I would never forget. Look, Sarah, I am willing to throw you a bone here. Once the app launches and starts generating revenue, maybe I could bring you on as a junior developer or something. You clearly understand the technical side, and I could use someone to help with maintenance and updates. The audacity of his offer was breathtaking. He was proposing to hire me to work on my own stolen creation, and he was presenting it as an act of generosity. I closed my laptop, slowly gathered my documents, and stood up from the table. My family watched me with expressions ranging from annoyance to mild concern, but none of them showed any understanding of what they had just done to me. "You know what, Marcus?" I said, my voice eerily calm. "You are absolutely right. You should definitely launch the app next month. In fact, I insist on it." He looked confused by my sudden agreement. "Really?" "Oh yes. I think it is exactly what you deserve." I picked up my purse and headed toward the front door. "Good luck with your launch. I am sure it will be everything you hoped for." As I drove away from my childhood home that night, I was no longer the naive daughter who believed in family loyalty and blood bonds. I had become someone much more dangerous, someone with nothing left to lose, and a brilliant mind focused entirely on justice. Marcus wanted to launch my app. I would make sure he got exactly what he deserved from that launch. The real game was just beginning. The morning after that devastating dinner, I woke up with absolute clarity about what needed to happen. Marcus had made the critical error of underestimating me, and my parents had shown their true colors by choosing profit over principle. If they wanted to play dirty, I would teach them what dirty really looked like. My first call was to my former colleague, Diana Rodriguez, a brilliant cybersecurity expert who had left her corporate job 6 months earlier to start her own consultancy. Diana and I had worked together at a tech startup 3 years ago, and she had always respected my technical abilities. More importantly, she had her own history of being undermined by family members and would understand the personal stakes involved. "Sarah, I heard about what happened," Diana said when I called her. "Jessica mentioned something about a patent issue with your brother." I explained the full scope of Marcus's theft and my parents' complicity. Diana listened without interruption, her anger building with each detail I shared. "That is absolutely despicable," she said finally. "What are you planning to do about it? I need your help with something that requires your particular skill set. Are you interested in making sure justice gets served?" Diana was quiet for a moment. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Nothing illegal," I assured her. "But I need to understand exactly how Marcus is planning to execute this launch. I need to know who his investors are, what his timeline looks like, and most importantly, I need to document everything so that when the truth comes out, there is no way for him to deny what he did." "You want me to help you gather intelligence on your own brother. I want you to help me expose a criminal who happens to share my DNA." Diana agreed to meet me that afternoon. When I arrived at her downtown office, I found her already researching Marcus's business activities. She had pulled up his social media profiles, his company website, and several business registration documents. "Your brother has been busy," she said, turning her monitor toward me. "Look at this." On the screen was a professional website for something called Blake Innovations, listing Marcus as the founder and CEO. The site featured screenshots of my app interface descriptions of my algorithms and testimonials from beta testers that I had never heard of. He had built an entire company around my stolen work. "It gets worse," Diana continued, clicking through to a press release. "He announced a launch event for next month at the Riverside Convention Center. He is expecting over 500 people, including potential investors and members of the tech press. I stared at the press release in amazement. Marcus was not just stealing my idea. He was turning it into a major media event. The hubris was staggering. "Who are his investors?" I asked. Diana pulled up another document. Here is where it gets interesting. His primary investor is Hartwell Capital Group, and the managing partner is someone named Victoria Hartwell. But look at this. She has a history of investing in companies that later faced intellectual property disputes. 3 of her previous investments ended up in court over stolen technology. This information was gold. If I could prove that Marcus had misrepresented the origins of his technology to investors, he would not only face patent infringement charges, but also potential fraud accusations. My next ally came from an unexpected source. That evening, I received a call from my cousin Emma, who lived on the West Coast. Emma was my father's niece, and she had always been the black sheep of her side of the family. She worked as a private investigator specializing in corporate fraud cases. "Sarah, I heard through the family grapevine that you and Marcus are having some kind of business dispute," she said. "I wanted you to know that I have always suspected Marcus was not as honest as everyone thinks he is." "What do you mean?" "Do you remember when he claimed to have developed that marketing campaign for his company last year? The one that won all those industry awards?" I vaguely remembered Marcus being praised for some innovative advertising strategy, but I had not paid much attention to the details. "Well," Emma continued, "I did some digging because something about his story did not add up. Turns out he stole that campaign concept from a freelancer he had hired and then fired. The freelancer never pursued legal action because he could not afford to fight Marcus's company. But I have copies of the original proposals." "You are saying this is not the first time Marcus has stolen someone else's work?" "Exactly. And I am willing to bet it is not the second time either. If you want my help documenting his pattern of theft, I am all in. Family loyalty goes both ways, and what he did to you is unforgivable." Emma's offer was invaluable. Having a professional investigator on my side would legitimize my case and provide access to resources I could never obtain on my own. My third ally emerged during a chance encounter at a coffee shop downtown. I was meeting with Diana to review the intelligence we had gathered when I noticed someone at the next table listening intently to our conversation. When we finished our discussion, the woman approached our table. "Excuse me," she said. "I could not help but overhear part of your conversation. Are you talking about Marcus Blake?" I was immediately suspicious. "Who is asking?" "My name is Sarah Chen, and I am a journalist with TechWatch magazine. We are investigating a series of intellectual property thefts in the startup community, and Marcus Blake's name has come up in our research." Diana and I exchanged glances. This could be either a tremendous opportunity or a dangerous trap. "What kind of investigation?" Diana asked. Sarah sat down at our table, uninvited. "We have been tracking a pattern of entrepreneurs who build companies around stolen technology. Marcus Blake fits the profile perfectly. Rapid development timelines, suspiciously sophisticated product for a first-time founder, and investors who do not typically do thorough due diligence on intellectual property origins." "You think he has done this before?" I asked. "I think your brother is much more calculating than he appears. We have evidence suggesting he has been systematically identifying promising tech concepts and finding ways to claim them as his own work. You are not his first victim." Sarah pulled out a tablet and showed us a chart mapping connections between various startups and instances of alleged intellectual property theft. Marcus's name appeared multiple times as either a consultant advisor or early employee for companies that later faced IP disputes. "If you are willing to go on record about what he did to you," Sarah said, "we can make this the centerpiece of a major exposé. But we need ironclad evidence and corroborating sources." I looked at Diana, then back at Sarah. "What exactly would going public involve? We would want to interview you extensively, review all of your documentation, and potentially confront Marcus directly for his response. The story would run in our print magazine and online platform, reaching over 2 million readers in the tech industry." The offer was tempting, but I was not ready to show my hand yet. Marcus still did not know that I had uncovered the full scope of his operation, and I wanted to keep it that way until I was ready to spring my trap. "Give me some time to think about it," I told Sarah. "But I want you to continue your investigation. When I am ready to talk, you will be the first to know." As Sarah left the coffee shop, Diana turned to me with a smile. "You realize what this means, right? You are not just fighting Marcus anymore. You are taking down an entire criminal enterprise." "Good," I replied. "He chose to escalate this beyond a simple family dispute. Now he gets to deal with the consequences." That night, I created a secure digital workspace where Diana, Emma, and I could collaborate on building our case against Marcus. We had 30 days until his launch event, and I intended to use every single one of them to ensure that when Marcus took the stage to present my stolen app, the world would be watching for all the wrong reasons. The next phase of my plan would require precision timing and nerves of steel. But for the first time since discovering Marcus's betrayal, I felt confident about the outcome. He had taught me that family loyalty was a one-way street in our household. Now I was going to teach him what happened when that street reached a dead end. As I fell asleep that night, I smiled thinking about Marcus's upcoming launch event. He had no idea that instead of launching his career, he would be launching his destruction. And I would have a front row seat to watch it happen. 2 weeks before Marcus's launch event, everything changed in the worst possible way. I had been working 18-hour days with my team gathering evidence and preparing for the ultimate exposure. Diana had uncovered financial records showing Marcus had received over $2 million in investment funding based on fraudulent claims about his app development. Emma had documented 3 other instances of intellectual property theft spanning the past 5 years. Sarah Chen had compiled a comprehensive investigation that would destroy Marcus's reputation permanently. I felt invincible. Victory was within reach, and justice was finally going to be served. That confidence made me careless, and carelessness in a family war is always fatal. The betrayal came from Emma, the cousin I had trusted with my deepest secrets and most sensitive evidence. I discovered it in the most devastating way possible, through a text message that was clearly meant for someone else. I was working late in my apartment when my phone buzzed with a message from Emma. "Everything is ready for tomorrow. She suspects nothing. Make sure Marcus understands this clears his debt to our family." My blood turned to ice. I read the message 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood something. But the meaning was crystal clear. Emma had been working for Marcus all along. My hands shaking, I called Diana immediately. "We have a problem. Emma just accidentally revealed that she is working with Marcus." "What do you mean working with Marcus?" I read Diana the text message. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Sarah," Diana said finally, If Emma has been feeding information to Marcus this entire time, then he knows everything. He knows about our investigation. He knows about Sarah's article. And he knows exactly what evidence we have against him. The full scope of the betrayal became clear as I reviewed our communications over the past 3 weeks. Emma had been present for every strategy session, had access to all of our evidence, and knew the exact timeline for our planned exposure. She had been the perfect double agent. But why Emma had seemed genuinely outraged by Marcus's theft, and she had volunteered her help without any prompting from me. The answer came in a follow-up text that Emma sent 20 minutes later, this time clearly intended for me. "Sarah, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the Riverside Cafe tomorrow at noon? It's important." Instead of responding, I decided to conduct my own investigation. I drove to Emma's apartment building and waited in the parking lot, watching for any unusual activity. At 11:30 that evening, I saw Marcus's Tesla pull into the visitor parking area. He walked into the building like he owned the place. I waited for 2 hours until Marcus emerged from the building. As he walked to his car, he was on the phone with someone. I could not hear the entire conversation, but I caught enough fragments to understand that they were discussing how to neutralize the threat and minimize the damage. The next morning, I arrived at the Riverside Cafe 30 minutes early and chose a table where I could observe the entire restaurant. Emma arrived exactly on time, but she was not alone. She was followed at a discreet distance by a man in an expensive suit who took a table near the windows. When Emma sat down across from me, her usual confident demeanor was replaced by obvious nervousness. She could not make eye contact, and her hands trembled as she reached for her coffee cup. "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and you are not going to like it." "I already know, Emma. The question is why." She looked surprised that I knew about her betrayal, but she did not bother denying it. "Marcus came to me 3 weeks ago. He told me that you were having some kind of mental breakdown and were making false accusations against him to destroy his business. And you believed him." "At first, no. But then he showed me evidence that you had been struggling financially and suggested that you were trying to sabotage his success out of jealousy." I stared at her in disbelief. "Emma, you are a professional investigator. You have seen the timestamps on my development files. You know the evidence is real." "I know the evidence looks convincing, but Marcus explained how easy it would be to falsify digital timestamps. He convinced me that you had created elaborate fake documentation to support your false claims. So you decided to spy on me and report back to him." Emma finally met my eyes, and I saw something that chilled me to the bone. She did not look guilty or apologetic. She looked relieved. "Sarah, Marcus is offering me a position with his company as head of security. It is a 6-figure salary with equity options. I have been struggling to build my private investigation business, and this opportunity could change my life." The truth hit me like a physical blow. Emma had not been manipulated or deceived. She had made a calculated decision to betray me for money. She had weighed my suffering against her financial gain and chosen the profit. "There is something else," she continued. "Marcus knows about Sarah Chen and her investigation. He has already contacted her editor and provided evidence that you are an unstable former employee making false accusations. Her article has been killed." My heart sank. Months of work building a case against Marcus had been destroyed by someone I had trusted completely. "Marcus also wanted me to give you a message," Emma said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a legal document and slid it across the table. "This is a cease and desist order. If you continue making accusations against him or his company, He will sue you for defamation and harassment. I picked up the legal document and scanned it quickly. It was professionally prepared and absolutely legitimate. Marcus had not just neutralized my investigation, he had created legal consequences for any future attempts to expose him. He is also willing to make you an offer, Emma continued. If you publicly apologize for the false accusations and acknowledge that his app is his original work, he will hire you as a senior developer with a starting salary of $80,000. The offer was Marcus's final insult. He was proposing to pay me to work on my own stolen creation while publicly admitting that I had lied about the theft. It was the ultimate humiliation. I stood up from the table without saying another word. Emma called my name as I walked toward the exit, but I did not turn around. The man in the expensive suit was no longer at his table near the windows, confirming my suspicion that he had been recording our conversation. As I drove home, my phone rang constantly with calls from Diana. I finally answered when I reached my apartment. "Sarah, what happened at the meeting with Emma?" I explained the entire conversation, including Emma's betrayal and Marcus's legal threats. Diana listened in shocked silence. "This is bad," she said finally. "If Marcus knows everything we have been planning, he can prepare countermeasures for any move we make." "It is worse than that," I replied. Emma had access to all of our evidence files. She could have given Marcus copies of everything, including your cybersecurity analysis and the investor fraud documentation. We both understood what this meant. Not only had our investigation been compromised, but Marcus now had advance warning of exactly how we planned to expose him. He could prepare explanations, fabricate counterfeits, and possibly even claim that we were the ones engaged in fraudulent activity. That evening, I received an email from Sarah Chen confirming that her article had been killed by her editor. She apologized profusely, but explained that Marcus had provided her publication with documentation suggesting that I was making false accusations as part of a personal vendetta. "I still believe your story," Sarah wrote, "but my editor is not willing to risk a defamation lawsuit without absolutely ironclad proof. If you can find additional evidence that cannot be disputed, please contact me again." As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by months of research and evidence that had become worthless overnight, I realized that Marcus had played this game much more skillfully than I had given him credit for. He had not just stolen my app, he had systematically destroyed my credibility and isolated me from anyone who might help me seek justice. But Marcus had made one critical error in his victory celebration. He had shown me exactly how ruthless he could be, and he had taught me that the only way to win against someone with no moral boundaries was to abandon my own moral limitations. If Marcus wanted to play without rules, I would show him what a game without rules really looked like. The war was far from over. It was just entering a much more dangerous phase. The morning after Emma's betrayal, I woke up with a clarity that surprised me. While I had lost my investigation team and my journalist contact, I had gained something far more valuable: the complete understanding of what my enemy was truly capable of. Marcus had shown me his entire playbook, and that knowledge would become his downfall. My first move was to reach out to someone I had been avoiding throughout this entire ordeal: my grandmother's estate attorney, Jonathan Pierce. 3 months earlier, my grandmother had passed away, leaving behind a substantial inheritance that was still being processed through probate court. What made this relevant was that my grandmother had been a software engineer in the 1970s, one of the first women to work in technology development. and she had been meticulous about documenting her intellectual property. Jonathan agreed to meet me that afternoon at his downtown law office. When I explained the situation with Marcus and my stolen app, his expression grew increasingly serious. Serafina, what you are describing is not just patent theft. It is fraud on multiple levels. If your brother has misrepresented the origins of his technology to investors, that could constitute securities fraud. The problem is that he has been very careful to cover his tracks, and he just destroyed most of my evidence by turning my investigative team against me. Jonathan leaned back in his leather chair, studying me carefully. Your grandmother left you something that might be relevant to your situation. She included a provision in her will specifically related to intellectual property protection. He pulled out a thick folder from his filing cabinet and spread several documents across his desk. Your grandmother established a legal fund specifically designed to help family members pursue intellectual property disputes. She was very concerned about protecting innovation and creativity from theft. I stared at the documents in amazement. She created a fund to fight patent theft. More than that, she retained a law firm that specializes exclusively in intellectual property litigation. Pierce Morrison and Associates have been on retainer for your family for over 2 years, waiting for someone to need their services. This was the breakthrough I desperately needed. What exactly does that mean for my situation? It means you now have access to one of the most aggressive IP litigation firms in the country, and your legal fees are already covered by your grandmother's estate. More importantly, these attorneys have resources for investigation and evidence gathering that go far beyond what you could access on your own. Jonathan made a phone call and arranged for me to meet with the senior partner, Elizabeth Morrison, the following morning. When I arrived at Morrison's office, I found her reviewing a thick file that contained everything Jonathan had shared about my case. Elizabeth Morrison was exactly what I had hoped for. A sharp, experienced attorney with a reputation for destroying companies that engaged in intellectual property theft. She was in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of penetrating gaze that suggested she could see through any deception. Miss Blake, I have reviewed the preliminary information about your case, and I want you to know that what your brother has done is far more serious than simple patent infringement. If we can prove that he knowingly stole your technology and then used fraudulent claims to secure investment funding, he could face both civil and criminal charges. The problem is that my evidence has been compromised. My brother knows exactly what documentation I have, and he has had time to prepare countermeasures. Elizabeth smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. That actually works in our favor. When defendants know what evidence exists against them, they often make the mistake of over-preparing their defense. That desperation can lead to additional criminal activity. She pulled out a tablet and showed me a detailed investigation plan. We are going to approach this systematically. First, we will conduct a forensic analysis of all digital evidence to establish an unbreakable timeline for your app development. Second, we will investigate your brother's investors to determine exactly what representations he made about the technology's origins. Third, we will examine his previous business activities to establish a pattern of intellectual property theft. What about the legal threats he made against me? He sent me a cease and desist order. Those threats actually help our case. By trying to silence you legally, he is demonstrating consciousness of guilt. Innocent parties do not typically resort to legal intimidation when faced with accusations. Elizabeth's confidence was infectious, but I needed to understand what we were truly up against. You should know that my brother has family support for what he did. My parents are actively helping him cover up the theft. Family dynamics do not matter in federal court, Miss Blake. What matters is evidence, and we are going to find evidence that your brother cannot explain away or discredit. Over the next week, Elizabeth's team worked with surgical precision to rebuild my case. They brought in digital forensics experts who verified the authenticity of my development timeline, patent attorneys who analyzed the legal implications of Marcus's filing, and private investigators who began examining his business relationships. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Marcus's own arrogance. Elizabeth's investigators discovered that Marcus had been bragging about his brilliant strategy to several business contacts, apparently believing that his legal threats had neutralized any potential consequences. One of those contacts was David Chen, a former business partner who had grown suspicious of Marcus's claims about developing revolutionary technology in such a short time frame. David had secretly recorded several conversations where Marcus described how he had borrowed ideas from family members and turned them into profitable ventures. When Elizabeth played those recordings for me, I finally understood the full scope of Marcus's criminal enterprise. He had not just stolen my app idea. He had been systematically exploiting family relationships for years, using trust and intimacy to gain access to other people's intellectual property. "This is exactly what we need," Elizabeth said after we finished listening to the recordings. "Your brother has essentially confessed to a pattern of intellectual property theft. Combined with our forensic evidence and the testimony we can gather from his previous victims, we have an ironclad case." But Elizabeth had saved the best news for last. "There is something else you need to know. Our investigation into your brother's investors revealed that Victoria Hartwell from Hartwell Capital Group has been investigated twice by the Securities and Exchange Commission for funding companies with questionable intellectual property claims. She is extremely vulnerable to prosecution if she invested in your brother's company without conducting proper due diligence." What does that mean for our case? It means that when we expose your brother's fraud, his primary investor will likely face federal charges as well. Victoria Hartwell will have a very strong incentive to cooperate with our investigation and provide evidence against your brother in exchange for leniency. The final piece of Elizabeth's strategy was the most satisfying. Instead of trying to stop Marcus's launch event, we would let him proceed exactly as planned. But we would be ready with federal investigators, journalists, and legal documentation that would turn his moment of triumph into a public catastrophe. "Your brother wants to launch your app in front of 500 people and members of the tech press," Elizabeth said with that same cold smile. "We are going to let him do exactly that. But when he takes the stage to present his revolutionary innovation, he will be walking into a trap that will destroy his life completely." As I left Elizabeth's office that day, I felt a sense of anticipation that I had not experienced since this nightmare began. Marcus had taught me that family loyalty was meaningless when profit was involved. My parents had shown me that blood relationships meant nothing when choosing sides became necessary. Emma had demonstrated that trust was just another commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. But they had all made one critical miscalculation. They had assumed that defeating me once would be enough to secure their victory. They had not considered what would happen when I stopped fighting fair and started fighting to win. Marcus's launch event was now 8 days away, and every detail of his destruction was falling perfectly into place. The Riverside Convention Center had never hosted a technology launch quite like Marcus's event. 500 guests filled the main auditorium, including venture capitalists, tech journalists, potential customers, and several members of our extended family who had come to witness Marcus's moment of triumph. The stage was set with professional lighting, Massive screens displaying the app interface and a podium where Marcus would present his revolutionary innovation to the world. What Marcus did not know was that scattered throughout the audience were federal investigators, patent attorneys, and journalists who were there for an entirely different reason than celebrating his success. I sat in the back row wearing dark glasses and a simple black dress, watching as my brother prepared to destroy himself in the most public way possible. Elizabeth Morrison sat 3 rows ahead of me with her legal team positioned strategically around the auditorium. Victoria Hartwell from Hartwell Capital Group was in the front row, completely unaware that federal agents were documenting her every reaction to Marcus's presentation. Marcus took the stage at exactly 2 o'clock, looking confident and polished in his expensive suit. The audience applauded enthusiastically as he began his presentation with the same charm and charisma that had fooled our family for years. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today as I introduce PropSync, the revolutionary property management app that will transform how landlords and tenants interact forever. As Marcus launched into his presentation describing his innovative algorithms and user interface design, Elizabeth discreetly activated a recording device that would capture every fraudulent claim he made about the app's development. For 20 minutes, Marcus performed flawlessly, demonstrating features that I had spent 2 years developing while claiming credit for every breakthrough and innovation. The audience was genuinely impressed, and several investors were already making notes about potential follow-up meetings. Then Elizabeth Morrison stood up. "Excuse me, Mr. Blake," she said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the auditorium. "I have a question about your app development timeline." Marcus looked momentarily confused, but maintained his composure. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "You have described developing this technology over the past 18 months, but I have documentation showing that these exact algorithms were developed by your sister, Serafina Blake, beginning over 2 years ago. How do you explain that discrepancy?" The auditorium fell silent. Marcus's face went pale, but he tried to maintain his professional demeanor. "I am not sure what documentation you are referring to, but I can assure you that PropSync is entirely my original work." Elizabeth smiled and gestured toward the back of the room where I stood up and removed my dark glasses. "Your sister is here today, and she has some interesting evidence to share about the true origins of your revolutionary innovation." The murmur that swept through the audience was electric. Family drama at a tech launch was unprecedented, and every journalist in the room immediately understood that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Marcus stared at me with an expression of pure hatred, finally realizing that he had walked into a carefully orchestrated trap. "Serafina, what are you doing here?" I walked down the aisle toward the stage, my voice steady and clear. "I am here to reclaim what you stole from me, Marcus. Every algorithm you just demonstrated, every feature you claim to have invented, every innovation you described. All of it was my work." Victoria Hartwell turned in her seat to stare at me, her face showing the first signs of panic as she began to understand the implications of what she was hearing. Elizabeth continued her methodical destruction of Marcus's claims. "Mr. Blake, I have digital forensics evidence showing that Miss Blake developed this technology beginning in early 2023. I also have recorded conversations where you admitted to borrowing ideas from family members for your business ventures." The audience was now completely silent, watching this family confrontation unfold with fascination and horror. Marcus looked around desperately for support, but found none. "Furthermore," Elizabeth announced, "federal investigators are present today because your misrepresentation of this technology's origins to investors constitutes securities fraud." That was the signal for the federal agents to reveal themselves. 3 men in dark suits stood up simultaneously from different sections of the audience. The auditorium erupted in shocked whispers and the frantic clicking of cameras. Marcus finally lost his composure completely. "This is ridiculous. You cannot just disrupt a legitimate business event with these false accusations." I stepped onto the stage and faced my brother directly. "Marcus, you stole 2 years of my life's work and convinced our parents to help you cover it up. You destroyed my trust and family loyalty and taught me that blood relationships mean nothing when profit is involved. But you made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" he snarled. "You assumed that defeating me once would be enough. You never considered what would happen when I stopped playing by family rules and started playing by legal rules." Elizabeth joined us on the stage and addressed the stunned audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have witnessed today is the exposure of an elaborate intellectual property fraud. Mr. Blake will be facing both civil and criminal charges for patent theft, securities fraud, and conspiracy." The federal agents approached the stage and one of them addressed Marcus directly. "Mr. Blake, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding fraudulent representations made to investors." As Marcus was led away from the stage in handcuffs, I felt a satisfaction that was deeper than simple revenge. This was justice being served in the most public and humiliating way possible. But the consequences extended far beyond Marcus. Victoria Hartwell was approached by federal agents in the auditorium lobby and informed that her investment activities were under investigation. Our parents, who had been watching the live stream from home, were contacted by investigators that afternoon about their potential knowledge of the fraud. Emma called me 3 times that evening, but I did not answer. Her betrayal had taught me that some relationships could not be repaired, and her association with Marcus's criminal activities would likely result in legal consequences of her own. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. Marcus was formally charged with patent fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy within 2 weeks. His company was dissolved, and all investor funds were frozen pending the outcome of the criminal case. Victoria Hartwell's investment firm was investigated by the SEC, ultimately resulting in substantial fines and business restrictions. Most importantly, for my personal healing, the Patent Office reversed Marcus's fraudulent filing and awarded the original patent to me. PropSync launched 6 months later under my ownership with funding from investors who were impressed by both the technology and the integrity I had demonstrated in fighting for it. My relationship with my parents never recovered. Their choice to support Marcus's theft over my legitimate claims revealed a fundamental character flaw that I could not forgive or forget. I maintained minimal contact for legal purposes related to family business, but the emotional bonds had been permanently severed. However, I discovered something much more valuable than family loyalty. I built a chosen family of people who shared my values and supported my success. Diana became my business partner and closest friend. Jonathan Pierce became a trusted advisor who helped me navigate the complex legal landscape of technology entrepreneurship. Elizabeth Morrison became a mentor who taught me that justice was worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. The experience taught me that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones closest to us. But it also showed me that integrity and perseverance ultimately triumph over deception and betrayal. Marcus had stolen my creation, but in fighting to reclaim it, I discovered strength and resilience that I never knew I possessed. Today, PropSync is a multi-million-dollar company serving thousands of landlords and tenants across the country. Every time I see our app being used successfully, I remember that this victory came not just from brilliant technology, but from the courage to fight for what was right, even when my own family stood against me. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle discovering that family loyalty was not as strong as you believed? Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and fighting for justice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because these family karma stories always have layers that resonate with different people. If this story of fighting back against family betrayal inspired you, hit that like button to show your support for justice over family politics. Subscribe for more real-life revenge stories where the good guys actually win and karma delivers exactly what people deserve. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself is always worth the fight, even when it costs you relationships you thought were permanent. Thank you for watching my journey from victim to victor. Remember that family is supposed to lift you up, not tear you down. And sometimes the best families are the ones you choose for yourself. Until next time, keep fighting for what belongs to you and never let anyone convince you that loyalty means accepting betrayal.